Hello and welcome to tutorial 84 in the series of tutorials and programs that focus on TradeStation Easy Language. If you're not part of our email list or you're not familiar with our website, then please go to markplex.com where there are many other tutorials and programs that you might be interested in. So in this tutorial, what I want to do is just show you how simple it is to find situations where, as you can see on the chart here, you get a low pivot that is at or close to a value where a recent high pivot has occurred. In this case, you can see here there's been two high pivots at approximately the same level as this low pivot, and what I've done is plotted some dots there. I've also drawn a line between the appropriate pivots. So I'm going to do this in a few stages and then gradually make the program more elaborate, and then I'm going to provide a commented and functioning program that you can download for a small fee if you wish to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with a fresh program. This is a program obviously I've already written, but I'm going to do it from scratch so you can sort of see the steps of what I go through. So let's go to tutorial 84 new, and we'll start here. And the first thing we want to do is find out if there has been a low pivot. So we're going to do that. We're going to put in value 1 equals, we're going to use the TradeStation pivot function, and we're looking for a low pivot. And put price of low, L or LOW, whichever you prefer. Now we want to know if one of these has just occurred, and I'm going to set the right strength and the left strength as 3. So that means that we need to have a look back of 4, and that is because we're adding 1 to the right strength and making it 4. So that will tell us when there has been a low pivot confirmed, and it won't tell us a situation where there is not a low pivot. Okay, so we're looking for the most recent low pivot. Put 1 there. Looking for a low pivot, so that becomes -1, and then this is going to return a couple of values. So we're going to put in a couple of variables here: o pivot price L and o pivot bar L. Okay, now because we're using some variables, we need to declare those variables. So I'm going to do that just above here. And I'm going to give them initial values of 0. Okay, so we're now looking for a low pivot, and we know we've got a low pivot if this function returns 1. So we can say if value 1 equals 1, then we're going to see if we have any high pivots. We're going to do this in a begin end statement, and we're going to look back to see the last 5 high pivots. I'm going to look back 25 bars, just arbitrarily. You could choose a different value for this if you wish to, but I think this is easiest to demonstrate. So we're going to say value 2 is equal to 1 to 5, and this goes in a begin end statement as well. So what we're going to do is the pivot function will look back. If we put in this particular place here 1, that means we're looking for the most recent. If we put in 2, it's the next most recent. 3, it's the next most recent. So we're going to look for high pivots this time. We're looking for the most recent. In other words, value 2 is equal to 1. The next most recent, value 2 is equal to 2. The one before that, value 2 equals 3, etc. And we're going to do that looking back 25 bars. So the way we program that is we say pivot, and this time we're looking for a high pivot. As I say, we're going to look back 25 bars. We're going to look for a left strength of 3 and a right strength of 3. Now, in terms of the recency of the pivot, that's where this value 2 comes in, as I was just explaining. We want a high pivot, and we're also going to be returning a couple of values here. So just to save typing, I'm just going to copy these and just change, copy those and change the L to an H. and because we're using those, we're going to have to declare those variables. So again, I'm just going to copy, and I'm going to go up here, put a comma there, and paste them in, and we're going to set them initially to be 0, like so. Okay, so we're looking to see if there's a high pivot. So what we're going to say now is if value 3 equals 1, in other words, we've found the high pivot, and the O pivot price L, that's the value of the low pivot, is equal to O pivot price H, then we're going to do some plotting. So we're going to put yet another begin end statement. We need to make sure we close these off correctly. So we want to do the value of the low pivot, and we know that that occurred 3 bars ago because that's the right strength. And the value we want to plot is the O pivot price L. So we're going to put that there. And what we also want to do is we want to plot the high pivot value. So we're going to do another plot statement. Now, in terms of when this was ago, well, this is returned by this value here, O pivot bar H. It looks like I might have put in, just make sure that's a small O rather than a 0. And do the same up here. Okay, so we know it's O pivot bar H ago, and the value of it is going to be O pivot price H. But actually, in this case, the O pivot price H and L are the same, but let's just put that value in there. And we now need to start closing off our begin end statement. So this closes off the one where we're doing the plots. We also need to close off this for begin end statement. And finally, we need to close off this one when we found a low pivot. Okay, so that is the program very, very simply. I'm going to verify that. Let's just see if we've made any errors. Okay, we haven't. So what I'm going to do now is apply it to the chart. We'll see if we've got any instances where this occurs. Okay, so this is now applied to the chart, and you'll see that we have a low pivot here and the value of the high pivot there. And if we were to just check those values, we'll see that the low is 1448.75 and the high hit here is, of course, 1448.75. Okay, so that's a very simple iteration of the program, but we might want to make a few little tweaks to it to improve it. For example, we might want to draw a line between these two pivots. So I'm going to modify the program now to do that. So in this plot, what I'm going to do is draw a line between the low pivot and the high pivot that are indicated by the show me dot. And it's pretty straightforward to do. What we're going to do is just going to add another statement here, and I'm going to say value 4 equals TL underscore new, which is how we draw lines, and we want to draw from the date of the O pivot bar H the time square brackets O pivot bar H, the O pivot price H. Let's change that to price H. Then we're going to draw that to the date 3 bars ago, which is, remember, we've got a right strength of 3 for the low pivot. The time 3 bars ago, and then the O pivot price L. Let's just make sure that that's obviously is, but let me just copy that and put it in here, close brackets. Okay, so I'm going to verify, see if we made any typing errors. We haven't. We go back to the chart now, we should see, oops, we have a problem. If we go back to our program, we'll immediately see what that is, and that is, instead of doing it O pivot price L, we've done it O pivot bar L. So let's change that to O pivot price L. I'm going to press F3 to verify again. And there we have it. There we're drawing a line between the low pivot and the high pivot. Now, another thing we might want to do is actually have the program indicate when you've got a low pivot that's close but not exactly the same as a high pivot. And you can do that just by creating an input which we can call tolerance and changing the program as follows. So let me just make some modifications. So first of all, we're going to create an input, and let's call that tolerance, and let's make it equal to 1.5. It's going to be an input, so you can be able to change it equally. And what we're going to do now is we're going to say that O pivot price L has got to be greater or equal to O pivot price H minus tolerance. And let's just copy this to save some typing. And it has got to be less than or equal to O pivot price H plus tolerance. Okay, so let's press F3 and see what the result of that is. Okay, you'll now see we're starting to get some slopey lines appearing as well. Obviously this value here is within the tolerance. What you might say is, well, I don't really want the slopey lines, I'd rather that they were just the same based on the value of the low pivot. That's an easy change to make. So what we could do is, instead of drawing it from O pivot price H to O pivot price L, we could just make it O pivot price L there. So let's verify that. Okay, so you can see the nice straight lines now. Of course, there's some other parts of the program that you might want to make into input. So we've at the moment hard coded this value of here of 25. We might want to make that an input, so let's just do that. I'm going to call it look back, and let's make it 25 to start with. And what I need to do now is, in the situations where we're using the 25, which is really just when we look for high pivots, I've put the look back value there. Okay, so let's verify that, make sure it's still working. Look at the chart. It should look exactly the same, so we've not really changed anything in the calculation. And of course you might want to make the right strength, the left strength, you might want to make those into inputs as well, which you can do easily. And what I'm going to do is the downloaded program. This is just looking for situations where we find a low pivot and then we look back at high pivots. I'm in the program that's available for download. I've also included the situation where you find a high pivot and then you look back for the low pivots. What I'm also going to do is include for GoalPass members a little extra video which will just show you how you could color code the high pivots in this particular program, so that you could see whether it was the first, second, third, fourth or fifth most recent high pivot. Anyway, I hope you might find this program useful and this technique useful in your own programming. Thank you.